Holly's World Podcast. Ideally, this is the place where, you know how it goes. You live here, and that's the rules. So today I'm very, very fortunate that my guest is Billy Peck. Billy Peck, for anyone that doesn't know this superstar, he is a tremendous musician. And he'll be talking about the groups or group that he plays in and the type of music he plays and his favorite things. But Billy is also has his own podcast, and that's called Underground Inc. And that is part of the Podcast Arcade, which is what all the podcasts, including Geek Vice and Falcon Punch Dads and a few more, are very much involved with, and it's a great small family. So I'd like to introduce Billy Peck and have him talk a little bit about his podcast, and then we are going to do a deep dive into the wonderful world of WWE and wrestling. And all I can tell you there, folks, I've been jonesing really bad for this. So Billy, with that, welcome. Please take it away.
Well, I'm very happy that we were able to get this to happen. We had officially met and talked about trying to set something up at Old Comic-Con, but just scheduling and timing and just didn't happen to work out. But I'm glad that we can do this as part of your podcast. And I've been thinking about this show a lot lately, just because as you said, I am a podcaster myself, mostly with Underground Inc., where we we watch films, hang out, and just talk about the movies like friends would. And so it's kind of like, we're giving like an alternative commentary, that's the word I'm looking for, to these movies. But it's really just us hanging out, sitting down, and a lot of times we'll talk like comic book movies, and sometimes we've been getting into other things, but to say, like, if we are talking about comic book movies, we'll kind of compare them to the comics and what stories were related, and kind of where we see things going with them and whatnot. So that's kind of what Underground Inc. does, and we give fun facts and tidbits. And then I try to get on a Daydream Instruction Manual with two previous guests you've had, Eddie Fossler and Mike Golka, which were both tremendous episodes. I try and get on with them as much as I can, schedules permitting. And as they've already, kind of talked, it's just kind of a nerd haven of a plethora of topics. But what really got me excited about this was, like, I have some friends that I can talk to about wrestling, but I've never really been able to dive deep into it, like on a podcast. Like, I love comic book films. I love talking nerdy things. I love horror films, and I've been lucky enough to guest on someone else's show called A Basement on the Hill, being able to talk about horror films. But one of the major loves in my life is wrestling. And this is really the first time that I've gotten to talk about wrestling on a podcast in what I expect to be, this, kind of grand juncture of being able to talk about it. So I'm really excited about it.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. First of all, I'm thrilled to have you on. And I hope that this is going to be an ongoing dialogue, on a regular basis, to talk about wrestling, because there's so many different things that happen week to week or month to month. Who's the flavor of the month? Who's this? Who's that? Along with wrestlers that have passed away. And I never get tired. I never get tired talking of wrestling. I think it's because I'm so new to it and so many things I don't necessarily understand. But I am thrilled to have someone on as knowledgeable and savvy and smart as you, and has such I think, the same kind of passion for the entertainment that I do. So This is my best case scenario. There's nobody around. I can just pretty much talk wrestling with someone, and I'm not getting jeered from the sidelines or anybody else who doesn't really get how great worldwide or the WWE is. Sorry, it's
Sure.
the day and my brain's going a little slow.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
But anyway, I thought we'd start by talking about really what got you into wrestling. How old were you? What was the attraction and the appeal, and what kind of suckered you in and holds you to this day?
I first saw wrestling, like if I seen it before, I didn't really pay much attention to it, but the very first thing that really stuck out to me was I went to my neighbor's house and they ordered WrestleMania 10, and there's quite a few really cool matches on there, but the first one that I kind of walked in on, and everybody had kind of said like, oh, this match isn't going to be any good. It's two bad guys. How can there be two bad guys against each other? Because, with wrestling and most things in entertainment, really, it's good guy versus bad guy. And it was the ladder match for the Intercontinental title of Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon. And I was watching this thing, a match that everybody else there really didn't even care about. And I'm watching this thing, and it captured my mind really, really well. Like, there was a really unique thing about this match where it wasn't like the first ladder match ever, but it was the first one to really mean something. And Shawn Michaels was the IC champion for previously to it, and I forget exactly what happened, if he got like suspended or injured or something, and he had to go away for a while, so he had to vacate the Intercontinental title. Well, while he was gone, Razor Ramon won the title. And when Shawn came back, he basically was referring to Razor Ramon as an imposter. He didn't, like, Shawn never lost the title. So in his mind, he's still the champion. So they hung two Intercontinental titles above the ring. And it was to show, like, who is the ultimate champion. And it was a great match. I mean, you've seen ladder matches today, and I mean, every wrestler sets out to try and be at least as good, if not better, than that match. And Shawn Michaels actually lost that match, but the interesting thing about wrestling is you don't always have to win to put on like the greatest performance. And Shawn had basically became my favorite wrestler ever since that day.
You bring up an interesting point about that. And the way that I've learned about Shawn Michaels is that he is Seth Rollins' ultimate, like, bestest, greatest, most amazing wrestler that he admires.
Sure.
He feels that Shawn Michaels was able to go out and put on a match with a paperclip, cardboard, and he could make that piece of cardboard look like a Class A wrestler.
Right.
That Shawn Michaels wasn't the traditional WWE wrestler like prototype, but Shawn Michaels was able to go out there and do amazing things and win matches and get the crowd engaged. And I think, when I think of Shawn Michaels, I think, well, that's the echelon. If that's the echelon for someone like Seth Rollins, who, is on the road 265 to 300 days a year, who, it works out at least 5 days a week, sometimes 6. if that's that guy's hero, then this Shawn Michaels must be something pretty extraordinary. So
yeah, I mean, you know, most wrestlers, like, they'll go on record saying that, you know, someone like Ric Flair is probably the greatest of all time. And when someone like Ric Flair wants to have his retirement match against Shawn Michaels, again, it kind of just shows how well respected someone like Shawn is. You know, because he wasn't like, he was great at being able to make himself look good and make his opponent look even better.
And I think that may be what is so appealing to Seth Rollins, because I think Seth Rollins shares that same mentality, which is, I'm going to look great, but I'm going to make my opponents look equally good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another person who does that is Dolph Ziggler. I think he bumps
sure.
like crazy. He always makes his opponents look like they are a super challenge.
Yep.
And he has some good wicked moves.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, when I think about people, when I think about Shawn Michaels, you know, the one thing that came to my mind that I learned about him was that he had an adaptability. Whatever kind of style another wrestler had, he was able to adapt his style. And what I've read about Seth Rollins, and that's why he's compared to Shawn Michaels so much, it's not about the high flying flippy stuff that people talk about. It's Seth's ability to adapt his style to whether it needs to be more of a mat-based fight, whether it needs to be a high-flying offense fight, you know, whatever type of fight it needs to be. Seth is able to, you know, essentially complement his style and also make his opponent look good. And I find that to be almost like a charitable thing with a wrestler. So,
oh, sure. Yeah.
it's definitely fascinating. So you started watching by watching WrestleMania 10. How old were you?
I think that was in like 92. So
Okay.
I would have been like 7, 8, something like that. I was born in 85 and I'm terrible at math.
Oh my gosh, you are. Yeah, I had graduated from college by then. But okay, so then what was then kind of what happened? Did you say, you know what? I really dig this wrestling and I wanna continue watching, or did it happen by just watching with your friends, or is this something that you sought out specifically that you're like, I really dig this?
It was something that I started looking into more so myself, and I wanted as much of it as I could get. You know, I started watching you know, WWF at the time and Monday Night Raw, and you know, and then WCW came out with Monday Nitro, and you know, the whole Monday Night Wars started, and you know, there was always a lot of people that were very much like one side or the other, and I always liked WWF a little bit more, but I just loved wrestling. So like I would, you know, in between commercials, I'd be flipping back and forth and just enjoying watching wrestling. And then like those were really the only things that were on at the time. But ESPN Classic would always show like really old like AWA and NWA things too, with people like Mad Dog Vachon or Bruiser Brody, and like just really older, you know, generation type people. So I was watching stuff from like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, just trying to get as much in as I could. And then,
That's
you know,
impressive.
yeah,
That
and
is impressive.
then going to school, you know, you start to find out other people that like it. And I had a couple of my really good friends. I mean, as far as wrestling went, like these were my best friends and they lived across the street from me. And so like we would go over to each other's houses and watch wrestling and play with the toys. And, got so much into it that like we started creating our own characters and putting on our own matches.
Wow. I
Yeah,
love
like we were really really into it, and oddly enough, like, you know, unfortunately you lose touch with people over the years. Um you had seen that I was at a recent Monday Night Raw a couple weeks ago,
Yes.
and they were right behind me. They were the row right behind me, so I got to enjoy wrestling with them again. So that was just really kind of a special moment.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. Okay, so I'm going to move to like, okay, so people talk about the Attitude Era, they talk about the Reality Era.
Sure.
As far as you're concerned, do you think that, you know, the Attitude Era, you know, was the best and the greatest, and now we're kind of in a different, you know, we're in a much different world where with all the social media and all the information platforms that are out there, you know, I think people are wanting to draw back the curtain further and further on
Oh, for
wrestling.
sure. Yeah.
Tell me, did you enjoy the Attitude Era? Were you passionate about it, or was it just kind of like, well, we're going through this now and something will be after it?
Well, I mean, at that time, I mean, that was like when I was extremely heavy into it. You know, like when I saw that first match in like 92, I would watch it as much as I could. You know, but you know, I was a little kid, you know, I guess I didn't always know when it was on or whatever, but you know, by the time I was starting to get a little older, I was becoming a teenager, and the Attitude Era was happening in like 97-ish, you know, so that's like 5 years later. And you know, I liked a lot of what was happening before that. But you know, and it's kind of a common thing that you hear on like the network and things now with retrospectives where, you know, there was a lot of people where like uh they were jobs. You know, like there was Duke the Dumpster Drosy, there was IRS the insurance agent, you know, there was a plumber, there was a hockey player, you know, there was a lot of just kind of silly characters, and I still enjoyed it because at the end of the day, like I like wrestling, so silly characters don't really bother me too much. But so to answer the question, by the time the Attitude Era came around, you know, it started to become a little more edgy, and you know, that fit with my growing, you know, maturity or whatever. Um, and sure, I thought that was a lot of fun. It was cool to watch someone like Stone Cold guzzle beers and flip off people, or you know, DX running around with, you know, you know, their wieners hanging out or whatever. You know, just, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff happening. You know, you know, Sable, you know, there's a classic image of her, you know, she was in a bikini contest where she just had like hand pasties over her chest. Like, sure, as like a teenager, there's a lot of crazy stuff to see, but it still all came down to the wrestling for me.
Okay.
And what was really cool, and a lot of people have a hang up on the Attitude Era because it was so edgy and crazy, but what I loved about it was every single wrestler on the roster was a star.
Hmm.
Like the way today is, you know, there's like not talking about wrestling ability or anything, but if you see someone like Heath Slater come out, you know that he's an undercard kind of B talent, whether
Right.
he's great in the ring or not.
Okay.
It wasn't like that then. It was every single wrestler was the main event. It didn't really matter what place you were on in the card, you were a main event wrestler, and everybody had a major storyline. They weren't trying to figure out who, you know, like, oh, we don't really have anything for you, you know, like you hear a lot today, you know, people don't get used up
Yes.
because we don't have anything for you. Everybody had something, and there were multiple wrestlers that were in two or three different angles at the same time. So it was always interesting. Something great was always happening. And that's what I loved about the Attitude Era.
So what do you think changed, Billy? What do you think, what was the, if you want to call it the driving force or the impetus for change to where it's not like that? Because as I understand it, you know, they have the A-listers, the B-listers, the C-listers, and kind of the D-listers. And
Yeah,
so
sure.
the A's are obviously the main eventers, and, you know, and then the B is kind of more like the mid card to the upper mid card, and then the C's are like the lower mid card to, you know, pretty much the lower card, and then, you know, D's are just jobbers.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to get your opinion on what changed. What changed between the Attitude Era and everyone being a star to having just, I feel like, a few stars or one or two, or this is the face that runs the place, or you know, I feel like it's, you know, they want one person on the top of the mountain versus several people on the top of the mountain. So can you give us your thoughts on that?
I think, you know, I think there's a lot of things that go into why at that time of the, I don't even need to say like the Attitude Era, but the Monday Night Wars, there was competition.
Okay.
So, you know, on one show, you had people that became huge, larger than life stars like Stone Cold and The Rock and, you know, DX, where on the other show you had Goldberg and Hulk Hogan and the NWO, and you had some of the older people like Macho Man Randy Savage and Ric Flair, and the Giant, now known as the Big Show. Like, you had these huge, larger than life people that you couldn't help but enjoy everything that was going on. I mean, wrestling was such a big time at that point where, like, nowadays you hear that, like, if they're lucky, like Monday Night Raw might get like 3 million viewership.
Right. Right.
Both Monday Night Raw and Nitro each had 3 million viewers apiece. Like, so you had 6 million people watching wrestling. That was huge.
Yes.
And there were times where, like, there's certain segments that have gone down in history where, like, a segment on Raw had 7 million viewers on its own, and there was just like a perfect hot spot, and like, that was still kind of the growing phase of wrestling and television as well. So everybody was hungry, and Raw was trying to outdo Nitro, and Nitro was trying to outdo Raw. So they're always putting their best foot forward. Now, I don't knock the wrestling thing that we get today. Like, I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's really all that bad. You know, like it or not, you know, the biggest star is John Cena. And you know, he's done huge numbers for them, but I don't think he's done the same thing that, you know, the previous people have. So when you have kind of one major guy doing it, you know, that starts to lose people. People's attention spans are much shorter. You know, there's, I don't know, and the wrestling business, and in particular WWE, has gotten way bigger than it ever has, which means they have to cater to a lot of different styles of people. So
It's
I don't know.
true.
Those are some reasons of why it might be different.
I agree with you. They had to kind of widen the scope, and they wanted different demographics.
Yes.
And that has changed the makeup of some of the performers. in a sense. Do we want silly people for children and, stuff like that? And so I think it's definitely a complete contrast from the Attitude era where
Sure.
they just didn't give a blankety blank about any of that.
Exactly.
Um,
And something that I really love about today, like, now the war is kind of among fans now, as opposed to wrestling companies. Like, nobody, and this isn't knocking smaller organizations, but nobody is as big as the WWE.
no, they're the behemoth, and they've made it clear that they're the behemoth, and they're going to stay the behemoth.
Yeah, I mean, and nothing will ever, I don't think, come to what they have. So what we have now are, there's WWE fans, there's the independent scene fans,
Right.
and I, like I've said this whole time, I've always considered myself just a wrestling fan. But there are those people that are against kind of like the WWE product that are indie fans, and I kind of don't understand why sometimes, because I mean, Kevin Owens, who is back in the indie scene, was Kevin Steen,
Right.
in ROH and some other smaller companies, and he did great. He made a name for himself. He just headbutt Vince McMahon. Like,
Yeah.
Vince doesn't let that happen unless you're going to be like one of the guys. And like, to me, like, that's a win for the indie scene, having people like Seth Rollins, who I used to watch as Tyler Black in ROH and on the indie scene, AJ Styles, Shinsuke Nakamura, Finn Balor. Like, these are all huge stars that came from the indie scene who are all their champions.
Yes.
I mean, not currently, but you know what I mean, like,
I do know what you mean. And
that's amazing for the indie scene. Like, the first time that I realized something good was happening with the indie scene, migrating its way up to the WWE, was CM Punk when he finally won the WWE championship a few years back. And I'm like, wow, this is huge. This is going to change things. And then, like I said, you start getting Seth and Dean Ambrose and so many other people from the independent scene, Samoa Joe, Daniel Bryan. It's just like, that's pretty awesome. And it just makes WWE better too.
I like that they have the diversity, because I, thought when I used to, flip around and see wrestling, I was like, man, this is all so fake. They already know, it's, none of this is real. And, until I realized after watching wrestling for a little while, there is a true higher level of athleticism at work that most people cannot possibly comprehend. Most people cannot run the ring, run the ropes for 2 minutes. If you said to them, okay, run the ropes for 2 minutes, they'd be like, oh, ha, ha, I can do this. Nope, nope, nope. You run the ropes for 2 minutes and you're flat out exhausted. There is a high level of not only cardio involved, athleticism, gymnastics, timing, acting, all of it. And it's and another thing that people don't realize, and I'm constantly surprised by this, is that the roster is, they've got a decent size roster, but it's nowhere compared to the rosters of other sports organizations. They travel 300 days a year at least. They miss a lot of holidays. They miss a lot of stuff. And
there's no off season.
There isn't. It's not like they get to take 3 months off in the summer. It never works like that. They usually have, they are traveling, they are on the road. So for 4 days a week, they do a house show, or and then and then at least once a month they're doing a pay-per-view, and it's this crazy grind schedule. I think if you love it and you're passionate about it and you're luckily blessed politically and all that, it's probably a dream come true. It's for people who Daniel Bryan, who loved it, still wants to get back to it. Seth Rollins, that's all he wanted to do from the time he was like 2 or 3, was be a wrestler. To get to that level, to travel the world, to, all the perks that come with that. But at the same time, you pay a pretty hefty price.
Oh, yeah.
The wear and tear on your body. We could probably talk about that just for an entire hour.
Sure.
But it's intrigued me. It's really intrigued me that people don't realize how gifted these people are, how strong they are. They're responsible for somebody else in the ring. They're responsible for their life and their safety. You have seen enough, I'm sure, kind of glitches or blips or whoops, and it can be kind of scary because
how they refer to it as a botch.
Yes, I hate that word. Yes, something was botched, and it's like, they get it as perfect as they can most of the time. That's the way I view it. If there's other stuff I don't know about, that they missed this or missed that, I'll never know it. But when somebody gets dropped on their head, that's when I'm paying attention to.
Oh, yeah. I want to go back just a little bit. And this will be something fun that you can use towards people who refer to it as being fake and whatnot. What is your favorite TV show, Holly?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would say WWE Raw, but I guess for other TV shows, I guess you could say Blacklist or Game of Thrones.
Okay. And I know that's like, well, why is he asking that? There aren't actually dragons in Game of Thrones, right? Your favorite TV show is also fake.
I'm gonna have to use that.
Yeah. And people have tried doing that to me a lot. Like, oh, that stuff's fake. And I'll, through conversations, I'll know what their favorite thing is, and I'll be like, NCIS is phony too, right? They're like, they don't know how to respond.
Well, of course not. Oh, I love that, Billy. I'm going to use that now constantly.
Yes.
My new thing.
Obviously, we know, like, sure, things are predetermined. They try to protect themselves as much as possible. We know that they can get hurt and that there's a lot of it that isn't fake, but that's just enough to tell those people, like, screw off. Your favorite TV show is also fake. There aren't actually cars that turn into giant robots from outer space.
Oh, I can't wait to have the next conversation with some idiot. So I'll be looking out for that and keep you posted on my progress on converting people to our way of thinking. I want to go back a little bit and talk to you about some other favorite wrestlers and favorite matches. And I'm just going to give you kind of like a 5 favorite wrestlers and then, 5 all-time greatest matches that you would watch over and over and over and over and over and over. I know that's kind of limiting, but let's try for 5 until we move to the 10.
All right. Well, favorite wrestlers. Well, let's start with like just people on the current roster, and it's funny. And we might get into this conversation as well, but I went to a couple WrestleManias, and I was interviewed by someone who works for WWE, and I forget what episode it is, but if you go and watch Swerved, you ever watch Swerved on the network?
I love Swerved because Seth Rollins is on Swerve. So yes.
Well, so am I.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I forget what episode I'm on. It's actually, if you go to IMDb and look up Billy Peck, you'll see what episode of Swerved I am on.
Okay, I'm gonna definitely check it out.
Yeah. But the point of that was they kind of did a quick questionnaire, and they're like, who's your favorite wrestler? And I'm like, well, on current roster or of all time? And they're like, well, let's go with all time. As you know, Shawn Michaels. And they're like, okay, who's your favorite wrestler on the current roster? And I said, it comes down to either Luke Harper or Zack Ryder. And they were just like, what? Nobody's ever said either of those, and you said them both. Um, so there's those two.
Oh.
You know, unfortunately, they're both kind of people that don't get used enough or properly, but
Truth.
like I've seen them do so many things that are great. You know, but that could be again a conversation for another time.
Okay.
You know, other people like basically anybody who is part of the clique, Shawn Michaels group, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, X-Pac. And then I always loved like because they kind of behind the scenes, whether people liked it or not, kind of ran the show. And then to see basically them split and be like the head guys in DX and the head guys in NWO, like that was super awesome to me. There's some independent wrestlers, Zack Sabre Jr. I don't know if you watched the Cruiserweight Classic from
I did.
maybe like I mean, you've seen, you know, some of the wrestlers from like 205 Live. A lot of them came from that.
Okay.
Zack Sabre Jr. he might have been in the very last match. He's an amazing independent wrestler. There's a guy in ROH named Jay Briscoe who I love. I'm a really big fan of gosh, there's so many like that I really like. You know, some older wrestlers, Bruiser Brody, you know, some female wrestlers. I loved Beth Phoenix. I loved Melina. There's a lot, but
Okay.
I don't know. So there's some wrestlers that are some of my favorites. How about that?
That's a good list to go from. I want to know from you, pound for pound, brain cell for brain cell, who you think is currently the very best wrestler in the world. It doesn't have to be in WWE, but who you think is the very best at the top of their game, killing it every night when they're out there or defending their title or whatever it is, or maybe, you know, they're performing at the local, gosh, some sort of Mason's Lodge or something. But who do you
sure.
think is the best guy, best person, best wrestler, man or woman, in the world today, who is just constantly honing their craft, exciting to watch, gets the crowds engaged, and, you know, should be like wrestler of the year?
Gosh, if I had to pick the person that I think is just the best, it would be that Zack Sabre Jr. who I brought up.
Okay.
And I know that's, you know, maybe a little unfair to some, you know, wrestling fans that aren't able or capable to see a lot of, you know, stuff outside of WWE.
Sure.
But he, again, like you can go back to the Cruiserweight Classic and watch his matches. And when I went to WrestleMania, not this last one, but the one in Dallas, I went to every single wrestling event that I could, WWE and independent, whatever. And I got to see him wrestle someone named Will Ospreay, who's another guy that the indie scene just loves, and he's great. But as far as, he's not like the biggest like entertainer, you know. You know, he's not like a super like mic, you know, talker. You know, he doesn't get the crowd pumped up through promos or whatnot. But you watch him wrestle, and it is incredibly smart. He can he knows his body and his opponent's body better than like anybody. And however, you know, his opponent is trying to put holds or moves on him, he can turn it into whatever he wants.
Wow.
And it's amazing to see. So just like from a wrestling standpoint, I've never seen anybody like him ever.
Wow.
And
That's a
yeah,
huge statement for you.
yes. When I saw the match with him and Will Ospreay, so many things happened during it that I like my mind was just blown. Like I'd never seen anything like it, and I went up and I told them both afterwards. I'm like, this is literally the best match I've ever witnessed.
Wow.
Yeah,
What was
it
the
was really
reaction?
great. They were, they were humble. Being a musician and people coming up and be like, oh my gosh, that was like the best show I've ever seen. Like, it's very nice to hear, but sometimes it's a little hard to take in because it's like, well, I know that there's better stuff out there, but you appreciate, what they were saying. So they weren't like overly ecstatic, like, oh my God, you think I just wrestled the best match you've ever seen? But they were very like, wow, thank you. That's so nice to hear. But then, you start, wrestling is more than just wrestling. It is entertaining the crowd and putting on a great show and getting them hyped and entertained. And, I could personally see maybe the common wrestling fan get maybe bored with something that Zack Sabre Jr. did or does.
Mm.
So someone that I think just really does a great job of being a wrestler, getting the crowd just really into it and just enjoying it. And adding in the talking. Gosh, Samoa Joe I'd put up there. AJ
Yeah.
Styles I would put up there.
AJ Styles is amazing. I mean,
Yeah,
when they call him the phenomenal one, if there
yeah.
wasn't Seth, it would be AJ Styles.
And
'Cause he,
and I love Seth too. I don't take anything away from him. Um, I think his interactions with the crowd, I don't think it's lacking anything, but it's not. He's kind of like a common person, and people can relate to that. But when I think talkers, I think like The Rock or Ric Flair,
right.
or Kevin Nash, just people that like they grab your attention no matter what they are saying.
Okay. You mentioned your favorite match. Are there some other matches that because I think what I want to do, Billy, is I do want to talk about WrestleMania, but I want to shelve that until our next podcast together. But
Okay.
I'd like to talk to you about the top 3 to top 5 matches you've ever, either watched on TV or been in person for, and why they ranked the way they did.
The very first, and some of this might be because like I was there, so it has even more of a connection to me. But the
Sure.
very first wrestling event I ever went to was, I think it was 1995. It was in your house. It's called uh good good friends, better enemies, or something like that. And it was Shawn Michaels versus Big Daddy Cool Diesel, Kevin Nash, in the main event. And I mean, there are two of my favorite wrestlers. It's my first event I've ever been to, and it was a no holds barred match. And they built such a great storyline because they'd been best friends for so many years, and Diesel was put in the the background to Shawn. Like, to me, sometimes it's the whole build up that goes into the culmination of the match that makes a match mean more.
Okay.
And seeing that match and everything that led into it, and then how it finished, and I mean, Diesel took the belt off of the referee, like his actual belt, and like hung Shawn Michaels from the top rope. Mad Dog Vachon, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but he's a old time wrestler from Omaha who was in the front row, who's in a wheelchair because he has a fake leg. Diesel took his fake leg off and was beating Shawn Michaels with it. Like, it was crazy. And you know, and Shawn won, and it was a great match. And I mean, those two even consider that one of their favorite matches of all time. There's another one again with Shawn where him and Chris Jericho, they were supposed to do a program that was going to last like a couple weeks, and Shawn had like feigned some injuries against Batista to win some matches, and Jericho like started calling him out on it. And he's like, Shawn, you're supposed to be the moral compass. You know, you're supposed to be, you know, the people that the fans look up to, and you're lying about your injuries. And, you know, and Jericho's like, I used to respect you, but I don't anymore. And it was supposed to be just a couple weeks throwaway thing. And it ended up lasting like 7 months, and it ended in a world title match, ladder match. And like, it was, again, it was crazy. Like, it got Shawn's family involved. His wife was in the front row. It was a thing that they actually rehearsed backstage, and Jericho went to hit Shawn, and Shawn moved, and he was supposed to pretend hit Shawn's wife in the face. Something they botched, and Jericho like straight punched her in the mouth and knocked her out. And it was like, you could tell like everybody was just like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. But she was okay, and it just added more to it. The story was just intense. And by the time it ended, it was just like, wow, that was a ride. That was a journey. And the match that they had was great. There's some matches from a company called TNA. At one time, they were really, really great, and a lot of people thought if there was anybody that was going to rival WWE, it was going to be TNA. There was some great matches with Samoa Joe and AJ Styles there. Sting versus Samoa Joe in TNA was amazing. I don't know. Again, I could just keep rattling off a bunch of matches, and I'm like, this one's great, this one's great. But it was, you know, there's a lot of really fun stuff.
Okay, well, I think I want to wrap up with the last question for this session, because we're going to.
And it's up to you. I'm here all night, so.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome, and I do appreciate your time, Billy.
Yep.
But I definitely want to have material to build on, to make this really more of a series. And like I said,
no, I'm fine with that.
People to talk wrestling with. So, you know, our next one will cover the WrestleManias you attended. And I want to talk about the rumors that we read on a regular basis. If you read the rumors every day, I do. I want to get your opinion on things, you know, the controversial stuff, from Roman Reigns to John Cena to Enzo Amore being kicked out of the, you know, off a tour bus and not able to, you know, dress in the locker room, yada, yada, yada. But for this one, I think a good way to close this one out is to tell me what it is you love about wrestling. Like, what is the magic? I know what the magic is for me. So I want to hear from you what the magic is for you.
Sure. I'm a fan of entertainment in general. You know, and I mean, most of us are. You know, whether it be movies or comedy, you know, stand-up comedy or wrestling or rock and roll or whatever. Entertainment and characters are huge for me. You know, it's why I gravitate towards, like a band like Kiss or comic characters like Wolverine or the Ninja Turtles or something. Like, they're just these awesome characters. And wrestling is all about characters. It's all about characters telling a story inside and outside of the ring. As I was saying with, a couple of those matches, like, it wasn't even so much like just the match, it was everything that went into it. Especially the things that are organic about it. Seeing another favorite of mine, Zack Ryder, someone that I saw come into the company as kind of a jobber tag team and then get used as Edge's flunkies and then move into a singles career that was kind of weird, but also just like this. I loved it. And then he's not getting used properly. And then he like goes on and does this YouTube thing and gets himself over. And then the company starts pushing him. And then he wins the title, at, the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania. And like, again, like seeing a career develop, from just like scratch to like this huge thing. It was just like, wow, like I love stuff like that. And wrestling offers that on a weekly basis. People a lot of times are like, I don't understand why this is happening right now. There's a bigger picture. If you're willing to sit it out and stay on it for a while, not always are you going to get the payoff, but when you do, it's amazing. I mean, we can save, this story for another time, but like wrestling has meant so much to me. Like when kids, like the common thing is, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be an astronaut or a doctor. Like I was going to be a wrestler, and I've even gone and done training and whatnot. And like, I just love wrestling.
I love wrestling too. And I think I'm one of those folks that I love the things that they can do, the stories that they tell, like you pointed out perfectly, the stories inside the ring that they can tell that most people, I don't know that most people can tell that there's a story being told inside the ring.
It's difficult. It's difficult, but if you're really into it, you can start to pick out that stuff.
And then I definitely love the stuff outside of the ring and the promos and the smack talk. I just can't help myself. I just love all the smack talk. Yep. I imagine now, what if I could talk to my coworker like that? That's what I'd like to say. But it's so engaging and appealing and addictive. And when a match is working, there is nothing like it in the world to watch 2 or 3 or 4 people working together to create this art, if you will, this theater. And I definitely gravitate towards it. And so I'm thrilled to have someone that is that passionate about it to talk with. So I think for all the viewers out there who are listening, definitely check out Billy Peck. Check out Underground Inc. They are on Facebook. They are on, are you guys on Twitter?
Yes, we are. Yep.
So Twitter and Facebook. I don't know if you guys are on Instagram, but you guys definitely need to be checking out Underground Inc. Billy is, I mentioned, a super savvy, smart, talented musician, an interesting guy, a genuine person, and he has a lot of fascinating things that we can all learn from. And I'm looking forward to next month hosting Billy, and he's going to tell us all about his WrestleMania adventures, which I'm very excited to hear. And I think our listeners will be too. So, Billy, until next time, thank you very much for being on Holly's World Podcast.
Hey, I'm just here. I'm living in it.
You know, Billy, that may be the best thing you've ever said, period. When you were able to acknowledge that Seth Rollins is the greatest wrestler in the history of wrestling, which most people would not agree with, I think I will take that statement with me, and I'm just going to get that put on a T-shirt. Because
did I say that?
Yeah, you said it. It's in there for eternity, man. So
I don't think I said Seth Rollins is the greatest wrestler of all time.
Well, until you do, your other statement about just living in this world is absolutely brilliant.
Okay, okay, I'll take that. I don't know about Seth, but I live in Holly's world, so I guess maybe I have to think that Seth is.
I will eventually convert you, Billy, to the first world. I think he calls it first world of Seth Rollins. But
hey, I love Seth. I would never ever knock him. I just don't think he's the best.
And that's totally cool. And it's totally your opinion, so that's totally awesome. Yeah, I have to agree that, you know, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but there have been so many great wrestlers that have come before him and then will come after him as well.
Sure.
But for this purpose, I want to thank you very much sincerely. Loved our conversation. I can't wait to talk about not only, like I said, about WrestleMania. I want to talk about backstage politics and rumors and who we think are, like, you know, stuck being jobbers and who might be able to, you know, get out of the doghouse and maybe redeem themselves. And something that I have never discussed is the women's division. Typically because I've kind of felt like, what can I say about the women's division? And so I'd really like to get your perspective on that. And then I also want to get your perspective on jobbers, like how they feel and what your opinion is. And, you know, I have my own viewpoint, but again, I want to save that for our next exciting conversation on Holly's Pod World. So to all the viewers out there, you better be checking out Billy Peck. You better be checking out his savvy music. You better be going to Underground Inc. on Twitter and Facebook and everything else. And for now, have a great week, and please tune in for the next episode, and we will definitely get a date posted with Billy for the next episode on wrestling. Thanks, Billy.
Hey, no problem. Thank you.